Okay, I'm gonna try this video out on my back porch today. It's been so hot here in southern Arizona that I've barely been able to come outside for months, literally. Even the nights are too hot, so I'm grateful to have a sort of cooler morning. So I'm gonna go ahead and jump into the biology of Kundalini with loneliness and cellular panic. That's the topic today on page 103 if you're following along. So she begins, two University of Chicago psychologists, Louis Hockley and John Kakapo, I probably said that wrong, have been exploring the relationship between social isolation, loneliness, and the physical deterioration and diseases of aging right down to the cellular level. Hockley and Kakapo took urine samples from both lonely and more contented volunteers and found that the lonely ones had more epinephrine hormone flowing in their body. Epinephrine is one of the body's fight or flight chemicals, and high levels indicate that lonely people go through life in a heightened state of arousal. As with blood pressure, the psychological toll of inner tension becomes more apparent with aging. Since the body's stress hormones are intricately involved in fighting inflammation and infection, it appears that loneliness contributes to the wear and tear of aging through this pathway as well. Loneliness was found to affect around 209 genes involved in the basic immune response to tissue damage and the production of antibodies. You can find that at sciencedaily.com if you want to find the link in the book. Research will have to be undertaken to see whether genuine alchemical dark night experiences and consequent acceptance of fundamental aloneness reduces the overproduction of epinephrine and the chronic state of sympathetic arousal or unconscious panic that is normally associated with a lonely life. The subliminal fear that has always been with us, even in the womb, so that we do not even register we are in fear, call it neurosis, stress, narcissism, or whatever. Society in the West and war-torn areas is generally in a permanent state of unconscious panic, she says. This spiritual loneliness cannot really be resolved by others. For if you are already in a permanent unconscious panic, the company of others is just another terrible stress. It begins in the womb and it reflects the cellular memory of the spiritual separation, anxiety, and disharmony, not only of the mother and the primary relationship of the parents, but it reflects the general quality of spiritual integration in the community and times and humanity as a whole. Because it has always been with us, you can only get to perceive this fundamental cellular anxiety and spiritual separation from the cosmos when it stops. In the absence of cellular fear, you realize you've been living in a vice for no other reason than we are collectively programming ourselves this way. And it takes shamanic drugs, falling in love, Kundalini awakening, or samadhi experiences in order to realize that there is another way of being that we have not explored yet. In fact, there are infinite ways of being yet to be explored. So just to summarize, she's saying, these psychologists found that isolation and loneliness contributed to aging and disease, but then she's like, what about the dark night, which is actually like a beneficial kind of loneliness? Does this also contribute to aging and disease? And then she's like, well, we really are tracing it down to the fundamental aloneness that we feel at the moment of separation from our spiritual self. So actually a reunion with that during a Kundalini or during a heightened state of awareness is what finally quelches that inner loneliness, and we become reunited with our soul essence, which means even if we're alone, we're never alone. We're alone, but we're not alone. We actually have relieved that through remembering oneness, which is what a Kundalini awakening really does for you. Like a good self-flagellating Puritan, I personally feel more matured by my dark night experiences than my ecstatic peaks and revelations. I used to be plagued by incredible loneliness from the moment I came into this world, but now I treasure my aloneness almost more than life itself. And I feel that way on a lot of levels too. I do cherish my aloneness. Unless I'm with a really cool other person. But I'm sure I would not have lost the continual organic loneliness if it wasn't for the absolute joy of encounter with dark nights and die-offs. Knowing that life doesn't really get worse than this, and this down cycle is the most thrilling, enjoyable ride into the depths I could possibly imagine. Because it is the conscious experience of that which is being repressed from the consciousness. Thus, in a way, identical to an inner conjunction, a dark night is an ultimate homecoming. Because it is the conscious experience of that which is being repressed from consciousness. Thus, in a way, identical to inner conjunction, a dark night is an ultimate homecoming. We are in the end only really lonely for ourself, with a big S. The die-offs dark nights are a biochemical process which secondarily bring about the dissolution of the operational personality structure for a period of time. You go offline for a little bit. The brain is undergoing such a catastrophic neurological meltdown and renewal that the ego personality and functionality is temporarily completely non-operational. Depending on one's inner resources at the time, whether one is essentially imbued with a biological faith or has a tendency to fear, depression, and self-hatred, this will determine whether the incapacitation is navigated positively or simply adds to the burdens of an already difficult life. So this is why it's important to understand this process, because if you have faith and you understand that these dark nights are part of your awakening, that going in the depths of depression is actually uncovering your soul self, like your ultimate truth, that your union with God, which is at the root of all of us. If you trust that, if you believe that, if you have faith that this is part of the process, you will make it through. Otherwise, if you are just tending to fear and self-hatred, then this can be an even more disrupting time, right? Adding to the burdens of an already difficult life. The psychological, emotional story one gives to interpret this autogenic biological event is secondary to the chemistry, and yet is absolutely key to whether one can use the down cycle to further one's spiritual growth or simply cause an escalation of our primary suffering. What a big deal it is. So whether we can use these down cycles to further our growth, enhance our evolution, we know it's part of the path, we trust the process, we know there's downs with ups, if we can trust that, or does it just escalate our personal suffering? Does it just make us feel worse? Does it continue our perpetual loop of karmic fear and so forth? Down cycles are an opportunity to stop and experience our depths. The more we can quit our secondary meaning making and turn toward our suffering, she says, the faster it will transform. Excuse me. As the wound of Inchote is filled with energy of spirit, the more presence we can bring to all of our life. And the more we learn from our descent, the faster we rise to the upside of life again, having gained remarkable new understanding from our journey into the cave. In an audio on Michael Brown's website, he said that everything that was wrong with his life was due to the fact that he was, quote unquote, not here. In 1987, he developed an acutely painful neurological condition called Horton's syndrome. And to deal with the pain of his condition, he developed a method of increasing presence to overcome pain. His book that describes his practice is The Presence Process, a healing journey into the present moment awareness. And he's especially fabulous on audio, she says, a walk through the present process. Beautiful. It's absolutely amazing that the most primitive functions in the body turn themselves into the service of the highest biological faculty of transformation. Well, the next section is on depression, and it's a little bit longer, so I think we're just going to sit with this loneliness and cellular panic part for today and keep it short, and really look at the idea of that society doesn't necessarily teach us about the joys of loneliness, about the benefits of our time for ourselves, about the benefits of getting still and getting quiet and being with ourselves. Even our kids, if they're alone, they're like, I'm bored, or they have to have some constant form of entertainment. Or even as adults, we feel like if we're not doing something that we're just wasting time, or if there's some people to talk to, then the loneliness can be overwhelming, or the desire to even be in relationships that aren't for our highest good can sometimes come out of loneliness. So this is really saying, like that loneliness is a call to reconnect with God's self, with spirit, with the universe. And that actually can only happen when you're alone. So it's sort of like a funny paradox, right? The loneliness is asking us to look for the purpose and the joy in being with ourselves, being with the presence. And that our dark night of the soul experiences that Kundalini awakenings take us into actually offer us this presencing experience if we can allow and humble ourselves to this down cycle, to this what she calls cellular panic, where you're metamorphosizing on some level. That part of you is dying, and that's part of why we want company. We are afraid to be in the presence or in the company of our own breakdown, because we feel we're losing a part of ourselves when we do that. We feel we are like melting away, and actually that's true. But it's true in that the old way is giving way to the new. The old self is, as she says in the last line, the primitive functions of the body turn themselves into the service of the highest biological faculties of transmutation. And this is why I'm a proponent of leaning into the depression, leaning into the sadness, leaning into the boredom or the loneliness with awareness, of course, not unequipped. We don't want to get into that place and get so sad and lonely that we would do something damaging to ourselves. So we want to make sure we can self-regulate that, or we have a check-in if we need to, or a coach if we need to, and I am available for that sort of coaching. If that's something that you need, is someone to be by you, to check in with you during a time of a cellular die-off or a depression. And we will go into depression more in tomorrow's talk, but for now, I appreciate you checking in to read Biology of Kundalini with me, Exploring the Fire of Life by Jana Dixon. Really, truly a phenomenal book on helping to understand this spiritual process of awakening that really the whole wide world is in right now. So wherever you are in your process, where you've just had an inner conjunction, where you're feeling the high and feeling the bliss, or you're crashing from that, you're going through an integration or a die-off, or somewhere in between. Maybe you've already gone through one, but you're going through another one. You're wondering how it's going to be different. I appreciate you tuning in and informing yourself as we read this book together. Feel free to get your own copy or to read along for free online at lulu.com. I hope you're checking out all the other material on this page. Subscribe. Put the like button if you've liked it. Make comments, please. I'd love to hear how your process is going, or the process of the people that you love. And just to know that you're here listening and following along, and what your favorite part is about this, why you're tuning in. I'd love to hear that. So we'll see you again, and yeah, a blessed awakening to you.